The space station called Nexus Prime was the largest meeting place in the known galaxy. It floated in the darkness between three star systems, and today it was full of aliens from 12 different species. They had all come for the same reason. They had all heard the news that changed everything. Someone had found a void dragon. Stood at the back of the observation deck and watched the chaos below. He was a human, which meant he was nobody important in this place. Humans had only discovered space travel 50 years ago. They had no great fleets. They had no powerful weapons. They were small and soft and easy to kill. The other species often forgot they existed at all. Was on the research ship called Horizon's Edge. His job was to study alien life forms. He had spent the last 3 years reading old texts and ancient records about creatures that no longer existed. The void dragons were his favorite subject. Everyone said they had died out 10,000 years ago. Everyone was wrong. The dragon lay in the containment chamber below the observation deck. It was sleeping, held down by heavy chains made of a metal that could survive a star's heat. Its body was as big as a warship. Its scales were black like the space between stars, but when the light touched them, they shimmered with colors that had no names for. Its wings were folded against its body, but even folded, they seemed wrong somehow. They bent in directions that hurt his eyes to look at. The creature was beautiful. It was also the most dangerous thing had ever seen. Park stood beside him. She was the captain of the Horizon's Edge, and she was also his best friend. They had grown up together on Earth in a small city called. She had always wanted to see the stars. He had always wanted to understand them. "This is going to end badly," said. Her arms were crossed over her chest. Her dark eyes watched the aliens below with distrust. Nodded, he could see the problem clearly. Every species in this room wanted the dragon for themselves. The Hegemony Collective wanted to turn it into a weapon. The Federation wanted to study it and steal its power. The merchant guilds wanted to sell it to the highest bidder. Nobody cared about the dragon itself. Nobody wondered if it was afraid or confused or hurt. Admiral of the Hegemony Collective stepped forward. He was tall and thin, and his body was made of living crystal. When he moved, he made sounds like breaking glass. His species had ruled a quarter of the galaxy for 5,000 years. They were used to taking whatever they wanted. "The collective claims this creature," announced. His voice was cold and sharp. "We found it, we captured it, it belongs to us." Representative of the Federation rose from her seat. She was a serpent-like creature with 6 arms and scales that changed color with her mood. Right now, they were dark red. That meant anger. "The discovered the moon where this creature slept," hissed. "Your ships only arrived after we reported our findings. You have no claim here." "We have the only claim that matters," replied. "We have the power to take it." The room exploded into argument. Voices overlapped in a dozen different languages. Translators struggled to keep up. Somewhere in the crowd, 2 delegates started pushing each other. Security officers moved to separate them. Ignored all of it. He was looking at his tablet, reading the ancient texts he had spent years translating. The old records told a different story about the void dragons. They were not mindless beasts. They were not weapons. They were something else entirely. The old civilizations had called them bridges. They could connect minds across vast distances. They could help species understand each other. They had been the peacemakers of the ancient galaxy, loved and respected by all. Then something changed. The wars began. Someone decided that the dragon's power could be used for conquest instead of peace. The hunting started. One by one, the void dragons were captured, tortured, and twisted into weapons. They fought back, of course. They were powerful beyond imagination. But there were too many enemies and not enough dragons. In the end, they were all gone. Or so everyone thought. Looked down at the sleeping dragon. He wondered how long it had been hiding. He wondered how scared it must have been when the hegemony ships found it. He wondered if it knew that the same thing was about to happen again. "Captain," he said softly, "I don't think they understand what they're dealing with." glanced at him. "What do you mean?" These creatures were not monsters. They were diplomats. They helped species communicate and cooperate. The old texts say they could feel emotions from across the galaxy. They could sense fear and pain and loneliness. He paused, staring at the dragon's closed eyes. Imagine waking up after 10,000 years of hiding. Imagine opening your eyes and seeing nothing but enemies who want to use you. Was quiet for a moment. "You feel sorry for it." "I feel sorry for her," corrected. "The texts say void dragons had genders, they had families, they had names." He touched the screen of his tablet, showing her a passage he had translated last month. "This one might be the last of her kind. She's been alone for longer than human civilization has existed." Before could respond, something happened below. The dragon's eye opened. It was huge, larger than its entire body. It was not black like the scales. It was silver, bright and burning like a captured star. It moved slowly, looking around the containment chamber, looking at the chains, looking at the aliens who surrounded it. Alarms began to scream. The sedative should have kept the dragon asleep for 3 more days. The scientists had been certain. The scientists were wrong. The dragon tried to move. The chains held it down, but the metal began to groan. The station itself began to shake, felt the vibration in his bones. "That's impossible," someone shouted. "Those chains can hold a battleship." The dragon opened its mouth and roared. The sound was not just sound. It was something deeper, something that existed in frequencies that should not be possible. Felt it in his mind, in his soul. It was fear and rage and terrible, terrible loneliness. It was the scream of a creature that had lost everything and expected to lose everything again. 3 guards simply vanished. One moment they were there, the next moment they were gone. Their bodies had been pulled apart at the smallest level, scattered into atoms by the dragon's power. Admiral stumbled backward. His crystal body cracked, lines spreading across his chest like spider webs. He was shouting orders, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Emergency doors began to close. Security officers ran for their weapons. On the observation deck, aliens pushed and shoved, trying to reach the exits. Grab's arm, "We need to go now." But was not looking at the exits. He was looking at the dragon, at her eye. She was not looking at the guards or the chains or the weapons being pointed at her. She was looking at him. And in that silver gaze, saw something that broke his heart. She was not angry. She was terrified. She was a creature who had been hunted and hurt and betrayed, and she had woken up surrounded by hunters once again. She expected to die. She was just trying to take some of her killers with her. "No," whispered. "No, this isn't right." He pulled his arm free from his grip. "What are you doing?" He was already running toward the lift that led down to the containment chamber. "Something stupid," he called back. "Don't follow me." The lift doors closed behind him and descended toward the monster that everyone feared and no one understood. The lift moved down through the station and could feel the dragon's rage shaking the walls around him. The metal groaned. The lights flickered. Warning messages flashed across every screen, telling him to evacuate, telling him he was moving toward danger instead of away from it. He knew that already. He did not care. The lift doors opened and stepped into the containment chamber. The air was thick with energy, the kind that made his skin tingle and his hair stand up. The dragon filled most of the space, her massive body straining against the chains that held her down. Her wings were half spread, pressing against the walls. Her tail swept back and forth, leaving deep scratches in the reinforced floor. She was destroying herself trying to escape. Could see blood on the chains where the metal cut into her scales. She did not seem to notice. She was too afraid to feel the pain. Guards surrounded her in a wide circle, their weapons raised. They were firing energy blasts at her, but the shots seemed to disappear before they touched her scales. Some kind of shield, realized. She was protecting herself without even trying. Her power was that strong. One of the guards saw and shouted at him, "Get out of here, human. This area is restricted." Ignored him. He walked forward toward the dragon, toward those massive jaws that could swallow him whole, toward those claws that had torn through metal like paper. On the observation deck above, watched through the transparent ceiling, her hands were pressed against the glass. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "What is he doing?" she whispered. "What is he doing?" Admiral stood nearby, his cracked body supported by two of his officers. He was watching too, and there was something strange in his crystalline eyes. It might have been curiosity. It might have been amusement. "The human has lost its mind," he said. His voice made sounds like wind chimes in a storm. "It thinks it can approach a void dragon without being destroyed. Watch carefully. This will be educational." Other aliens gathered at the windows, looking down at the small human walking toward the cosmic horror. Some of them laughed. It was nervous laughter, the kind that comes when you see something so foolish that you cannot believe it is happening. "Stupid creature," Representative hissed. "Humans have always been too curious for their own survival. This one will die, and then we can return to the real discussion." Wanted to scream at them. She wanted to run down there and drag back to safety. But the lifts had been locked down and the emergency doors were sealed. All she could do was watch. In the containment chamber, stopped walking. He was close now, close enough that one sweep of the dragon's tail could crush him, close enough that he could see every detail of her scales, every crack and scar from ancient battles. She was looking at him again, that huge silver eye fixed on his small human form. The guards were still shouting, still firing their useless weapons. The dragon ignored them. She was focused entirely on. He raised his hand slowly, showing her his empty palms. No weapons, no tricks, nothing but himself. "Hey," he said. His voice was soft, gentle, like he was talking to a frightened animal. "Hey there, it's okay. You're okay." The dragon's growl deepened. The air around her began to bend and twist. Space itself was warping under the weight of her power. Felt pressure against his chest, like invisible hands trying to push him away. He did not move. "I know you're scared," he continued. "I know you've been asleep for a very long time and you woke up somewhere strange with people pointing weapons at you. That must be terrifying. I would be terrified too." The dragon's eye narrowed. She did not understand his words, but she could feel his emotions. That was her gift, the ancient texts had said. Void dragons could sense what beings felt in their hearts. Let her feel everything. His fear, yes, because he was afraid. Only a fool would not be afraid. But also his sadness for her, his anger at the aliens who wanted to use her, his hope that maybe, just maybe, he could help. The pressure against his chest lessened slightly. "I'm not here to hurt you," said. He took another step forward. "I'm not here to chain you or use you or turn you into a weapon. I just want to help, that's all. I just want to help." On the observation deck, the laughter had stopped. The aliens watched in silence, not understanding what they were seeing. The human should be dead. Any other creature would be dead. But the dragon was not attacking him. She was listening. Admiral leaned forward, his cracked face reflecting the light from below. "Impossible," he whispered. "This is impossible." Said nothing. She was crying and she did not know why. Was close enough to touch the dragon now. Her head was lowered, her eye level with his body. He could see himself reflected in that silver surface, small and fragile and impossibly brave. "You're the last one, aren't you?" he said softly. "The last of your kind. You've been alone for so long, hiding, running, waiting for the end." His voice cracked. I'm so sorry no one helped you before." The dragon made a sound. It was not a roar this time. It was something quieter, something that sounded almost like a question. Reached out his hand. The guards shouted warnings. On the observation deck, someone screamed, pressed her hands harder against the glass as if she could somehow reach through it and pull him back. His palm touched the dragon's snout. The world stopped, felt the connection like a door opening in his mind. Suddenly, he was not alone in his own head. There was someone else there, someone vast and ancient and unbearably sad. Memories poured through him like water through a broken dam. He saw galaxies being born, stars exploding into light for the first time. He saw civilizations rising and falling like waves on a beach. He saw the old times, when void dragons flew freely between the stars, carrying peace and understanding wherever they went. And he saw the betrayal, the first dragon captured, screaming as they tore her power from her body. The others hunted down one by one. The wars that burned entire systems to ash. The long, cold darkness of hiding, sleeping, praying for death that never came. Tears streamed down his face. The dragon's pain was his pain now. Her loneliness was his loneliness. 10,000 years of suffering pressed against his small human heart, and he did not push it away. He accepted it. He shared it. "I'm here," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're not alone anymore, I'm here." The dragon's eye closed slowly. The rage drained out of her body like water from a broken cup. The chains stopped groaning. The station stopped shaking. The terrible energy that had been tearing reality apart began to calm, settling into something gentle and warm. When she opened her eye again, it was different. The wild fear was gone. In its place was something that looked almost like hope. A voice spoke in its mind. It was not words exactly, more like feelings shaped into meaning. It was old and tired and beautiful beyond description. "You are different," the dragon said. "You do not want power, you do not want control. You grieve for me." "Of course I do," replied, speaking both aloud and in his thoughts. "How could anyone not grieve for you? You've suffered so much. You've been so brave for so long. No one has spoken to me like this in 10,000 years. No one has touched me with kindness. Then let me be the first." On the observation deck, the galaxy's most powerful beings watched in stunned silence as a human and a dragon stood together, forehead to snout, connected by something none of them could understand. The laughter was gone. In its place was only silence and the beginning of fear. Something had changed, something that could never be unchanged. The pulse spread outward from Nexus Prime at a speed that should have been impossible. It was not light, though it moved faster than light. It was not sound, though it carried meaning. It was something older, something that existed before the universe learned to separate such things. Every ship within 3 light-years felt it. Every station, every planet, every living being with a mind capable of thought. They all stopped what they were doing. They all felt something wash over them like a wave of warm water. And they all saw. On a mining colony in the outer systems, workers dropped their tools and stared at nothing. On a warship patrolling the border, soldiers forgot their duties and wept. On 100 worlds, billions of beings experienced the same thing at the same moment. They saw a dragon's memories. They felt her pain. They understood for just a few seconds what it meant to be hunted and alone and afraid for 10,000 years. The pulse carried everything, holding nothing back. It was the most honest communication the galaxy had ever received. And at the center of it all stood with his hand pressed against the dragon's snout, his eyes closed, his mind open. Her name came to him like a gift. It meant light between stars in a language that had been dead for longer than humans had existed. She had been named by her mother in the days before the wars, when void dragons still had families and homes and futures. Whispered, and the dragon shuddered at the sound of her own name. No one had spoken it in so long. She had almost forgotten it herself. "You know me," she said in his mind. "You see me as I truly am." "I see you," he agreed, "and you're beautiful." On the observation deck, the pulse had hit the gathered aliens like a physical blow. Many of them had fallen to their knees. Others stood frozen, their eyes wide and empty, lost in visions they could not escape. Admiral was shaking. His crystalline body made sounds like breaking glass as he trembled. The pulse had shown him things he did not want to see. It had shown him his own people's history, the wars they had started, the species they had conquered, the cruelty they had called justice. Compared to the dragon's endless suffering, his pride seemed small and ugly. Representative had coiled into a tight ball, her scales flickering through colors without pattern. She was crying, though her species had no tears. They had once been prey animals, hunted by larger creatures on there. The dragon's fear had reminded her of ancient terrors that her people had tried to forget. Even the guards in the containment chamber had lowered their weapons. They stood like statues, unable to move, unable to think about anything except what they had felt. Only remained standing on the observation deck. She was human, and humans had a gift for holding on to themselves even when the universe tried to shake them loose. She watched through the glass as her best friend communicated with an ancient god, and she felt pride burning in her chest. This was what humanity could be. Not conquerors, not warriors, something better. Slowly the pulse faded. The visions ended. Reality returned to its normal shape, though nothing would ever feel quite the same again. Opened his eyes. He was exhausted, his body drained by the connection, but he was smiling. Had lowered her head to the floor, her massive body relaxed for the first time since she had awakened. The chains still held her, but she was not fighting them anymore. "Can you make yourself smaller?" asked, both aloud and in his mind. "These chains are hurting you." "I can," replied, "but if I shrink, they will try to put me in a cage. They will try to take me away." "I won't let them." "You are one small human. How can you stop them?" Looked up at the observation deck at the aliens who were slowly recovering from the pulse. He saw their faces, their fear, their confusion. They had felt pain. They had experienced her loneliness. For a moment they had understood her. That moment might not last, but it was a start. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I'll figure something out, I promise." Studied him with her silver eye. She could feel his determination, his stubborn refusal to give up. It was such a human quality, she realized. Other species accepted defeat when they were outmatched. Humans did not seem to understand the concept. "Very well," she said. "I will trust you, little one. You are the first being in 10,000 years to earn that trust. Do not make me regret it." Her body began to shrink. The chains fell loose as she grew smaller, clattering to the floor around her. The guards raised their weapons again, but they did not fire. They were too afraid and too uncertain. When she was finished, was about the size of a shuttle, still large, still powerful, but no longer filling the entire chamber. She stretched her wings carefully, testing muscles that had been cramped for too long. The lift doors opened and ran out. She had managed to override the lockdown, using captain's codes that she probably was not supposed to use in situations like this. She ran to and grabbed his arm. "Are you insane?" she demanded. "Are you completely insane?" "Probably," admitted, "but it worked." Looked at the dragon. Looked back, her silver eyes calm and curious. There was no threat in that gaze, no hunger for destruction. There was only exhaustion and hope and something that might have been gratitude. She's not going to eat us." "I do not eat people," said, and jumped at the voice in her mind. "I never have. That was a lie told by those who wanted to destroy my kind." "She talks," said weakly. "The dragon talks inside my head." "Her name is," said, "and she's been through more than we can imagine. She needs our help." Before could respond, more aliens began entering the chamber. Admiral came first, his cracked body supported by guards. Representative followed, her scales still flickering with unstable colors. Other delegates came behind them, all of them looking at the dragon with new eyes. They had felt her pain. They could not unfeel it. "Human," said. His voice was different now, less arrogant, less certain. "What have you done?" Turned to face him. He was just a nobody important, one of the youngest and weakest species in the galaxy. But right now, standing beside an ancient dragon who had chosen to trust him. He felt like the most powerful being in the universe. "I listened," he said simply, "something none of you thought to do. The collective still claims this creature. Our rights are. Your rights mean nothing." His voice cut through the chamber, filling every mind at once. She lifted her head high, her wings spreading slightly, and even at her reduced size, she radiated power that made the air tremble. "For 10,000 years your kind hunted mine. You called us monsters, you used us as weapons, you destroyed everything we loved." Her silver eyes swept across the gathered aliens and none of them could meet her gaze. "I remember all of it. I remember every death, every betrayal, every lie. The pulse showed you a small piece of my pain. Imagine living with the whole of it." No one spoke, no one dared. "This human," continued, her voice softening as she looked at, "is the first being in 10,000 years to offer me kindness. He touched me with compassion when everyone else touched me with chains. He saw me as a person when everyone else saw me as a prize." She lowered her head, pressing her snout gently against his shoulder. He reached up and stroked her scales, and she made a sound like distant thunder, a sound of contentment. "I will not be claimed," she said. "I will not be used. I will not be caged, but I will stay with him. I will protect him and his people. Not because they are strong, but because they are kind." The silence in the chamber was complete. The galaxy's most powerful being stood frozen, unable to process what they were hearing. A void dragon had chosen a human. Everything was about to change. The news spread faster than any ship could travel. Within hours, every corner of the galaxy knew what had happened on Nexus Prime. A void dragon, the first seen in 10,000 years, had bonded with a human. The weakest species in known space had somehow connected with the most powerful creature in existence. No one knew what to do with this information. On the hegemony, the Crystal Council met in emergency session. Their perfect towers of living stone hummed with tension as the leaders debated what this meant for their empire. They had ruled through strength for 5,000 years. What happened when strength no longer mattered? On the home stations, the Federation's ruling serpents coiled together in worried clusters. They had always survived by being clever, by playing stronger powers against each other. But you could not be clever with something that could read your emotions directly. On Earth, the people celebrated without fully understanding why. Their representative in the galaxy had done something amazing, something that made humanity matter for the first time since they joined the galactic community. His face was on every screen, though he did not know it yet. Back on Nexus Prime, an emergency summit had been called. All 12 species sent their highest representatives. They gathered in the station's largest conference hall, a room designed to hold thousands. Today it felt too small. Sat at a table near the center of the room. Sat beside him, her captain's uniform clean and pressed for the first time in months. Behind them, rested in a coiled position, her wings folded against her body. She had made herself even smaller to fit in the room, about the size of a large ground vehicle. Her silver eyes watched everything. Admiral stood at the main podium. His body had been repaired, new crystal grown to fill the cracks, but the lines still showed if you looked closely. He was trying to control the meeting, to restore some sense of order, but his voice lacked its old authority. "We must decide what to do," he said. "This creature represents a threat to galactic stability. Its power is. My name is." The dragon's voice cut through his words like a knife through paper. Every being in the room heard it in their minds, clear and undeniable. "You will use my name when you speak of me. I have been called creature and beast and monster for long enough." Paused. His crystalline face showed no expression, but his hesitation spoke volumes. "Very well. Represents a concern that must be addressed. The hegemony believes she should be placed under collective supervision for the safety of." "No." His voice was quiet, but it carried through the room. He stood up slowly, his hands resting on the table in front of him. "No," repeated. "Human, you do not have the authority to." "I have the only authority that matters," interrupted. "Has made her choice. She has chosen to stay with me. You cannot force her to do otherwise." Representative rose from her seat, her scales shifting to an aggressive orange. "One human cannot stand against the combined might of the galaxy. Your species has no fleet, no weapons, no power. If we decide to take the dragon by force, then you will die." His voice was calm, almost gentle, which made it more frightening. "I have seen your fleets. I have felt the limits of your weapons. None of them can harm me. I could destroy every ship in this system before your fingers touched the firing controls. I could collapse this station into a point smaller than your eye." She paused, letting the words settle. "I do not wish to do these things. I am tired of death. I am tired of fear. But I will protect the one who showed me kindness. Do not test this." The room fell silent, could feel the fear radiating from the delegates. They were used to power, used to threatening others and being threatened in return. But this was different. This was not a negotiation. This was not politics. This was an ancient god telling them the simple truth of how things were. Stood up beside. Her voice was steady, professional. She had commanded ships through battle and had negotiated with hostile aliens. This was just another difficult conversation. "Let me be clear about Earth's position," she said. "We do not want war. We have never wanted war. Humanity has only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. We have spent that time learning, growing, trying to find our place among older and stronger species." She looked around the room, meeting eyes that quickly looked away. "We came to the stars hopping to find friends. Instead, we found empires that saw us as insects, powers that barely noticed our existence. We accepted this because we had no choice. We were small. We were weak. We had nothing to offer." She put her hand on shoulder. "Now we have something. We have a friend. A powerful friend who chose us not because of what we could give her, but because of who we are. Because one human showed kindness when everyone else showed cruelty." His voice hardened. "Earth will not abandon. We will not abandon. If you want to take her by force, you will have to go through humanity first. And then you will have to face her." The threat was clear. It was also somewhat ridiculous. Earth's entire fleet consisted of 12 research vessels and a handful of patrol ships. They could not fight a single hegemony battlecruiser, let alone the combined might of 12 spacefaring empires. But behind them sat a void dragon, and that changed everything. A new voice spoke from the back of the room. It was the delegate from the merchant guilds, a species called the traders who cared only about profit and loss. "Perhaps," the trader said carefully, "we are approaching this incorrectly. The human has done something unprecedented. The dragon has made her choice. Fighting this will cost resources and lives with no guarantee of success." The trader's many eyes blinked in sequence. "What if, instead of fighting, we negotiated?" "Negotiate with a human," scoffed. "They have nothing we want." "They have," the trader pointed out, "and has power we cannot match. That is something worth negotiating for." Slowly, reluctantly, the delegates began to consider this. Politics was something they understood. Negotiation was something they could do. It was safer than war, especially a war they might lose. Saw his opportunity. He stepped forward, away from the table, into the center of the room. "Let me tell you what we want," he said. "It's very simple. We want peace." Confused murmurs rippled through the delegates. Peace. What did that have to do with anything? "People were called bridges," continued. "They helped species understand each other. They ended conflicts before they became wars. They built connections across the galaxy that lasted for thousands of years." He gestured toward the dragon behind him. "That's what she is. That's what she was meant to be, not a weapon, a peacemaker." He looked at the gathered delegates, these powerful beings who had spent their entire lives fighting for advantage. The old galaxy destroyed the void dragons because they were afraid of peace. War was profitable. Conflict kept the strong on top. Understanding was dangerous because it might lead to equality. He shook his head sadly. And look what you built. A galaxy of empires that hate and fear each other. Constant wars over resources and territory. Billions of lives lost for nothing. He turned back too. She lowered her head and he pressed his forehead against her snout, just as he had in the containment chamber. "We can do better," he said. "Humanity and together, we can show you a different way, not through force, through understanding, through kindness." Through hope added, her voice filling every mind. I had forgotten what hope felt like. This small human reminded me. Perhaps I can remind the rest of you. The summit lasted 3 more days. There were arguments and threats and moments when war seemed certain. But in the end, the delegates agreed to something that had never been done before. Humanity would become the galaxy's mediators. With help, they would work to resolve conflicts peacefully. They would build bridges between species that had been enemies for centuries. It was not perfect. Many of the delegates resented the arrangement. Some were already planning how to undermine it, but it was a start. As they left the summit, looked at with something like wonder. "You actually did it," she said. "You changed the galaxy." Shook his head. "Did it, I just listened." "We did it together," the dragon corrected. "And this is only the beginning." 6 months passed, and the galaxy slowly learned what change really meant. Earth's first diplomatic floated in neutral space, a symbol of humanity's new role among the stars. It was called the Bridge, a name chosen to honor what the void dragons had once been. Ships from a dozen species came and went each day, carrying delegates and diplomats, traders and travelers, all of them seeking something they had never found before. Peace stood on the observation deck of the bridge, watching glide through the void outside. She had grown larger again, now that she had room to stretch. Her body caught the light of distant stars, her scales shimmering with colors that still had no names in any human language. She was dancing with 3 other shapes, smaller than her but just as beautiful. Other void dragons. They had been hiding just like, sleeping in the dark places between stars, waiting for death, waiting for someone to give them a reason to live. When sent her call across the galaxy, they had heard it. They had felt her hope, her joy, her amazement at finding kindness after so long. And they had come. There was a young male whose scales were deep blue like the depths of an ocean world. He had been sleeping inside a gas giant for 8,000 years, hiding from hunters who had long since forgotten he existed. He was curious and playful, delighted by everything the new galaxy had to offer. There was an older female whose scales flickered with points of light like a living star map. She had once been a great teacher among her kind, and she remembered the old ways better than any of the others. She had become's closest friend, the 2 of them spending long hours sharing memories and mourning what had been lost. And there was the youngest, barely 2,000 years old when the wars began. He had been too small to fight, too young to run. His mother had hidden him in the core of a dead star, wrapping him in her own power to keep him safe. He never saw her again. Now he followed everywhere, like a hatchling who had finally found a family. The galaxy did not know what to do with 4 void dragons. The old fears still whispered in the dark corners of every empire. Some said this was the beginning of the end, that the dragons would remember the ancient wrongs and seek revenge. Some said humanity had doomed them all by waking these sleeping giants. They were wrong. The dragons did not want revenge. They wanted what everyone wanted when you stripped away the fear and the pride and the endless hunger for power. They wanted connection. They wanted to be understood. They wanted to matter to someone. Humanity gave them that. Walked up beside, holding 2 cups of tea. It had become their ritual, watching the dragons play while sharing a warm drink. She handed him his cup and leaned against the railing. "The ambassador is requesting another meeting," she said. They have some kind of situation on their border with the hegemony. Trade disputes, I think. When? Tomorrow morning. They asked for you specifically. Laughed softly. 6 months ago I was nobody, who spent all his time reading old books. 6 months ago you touched a dragon and the galaxy held its breath, smiled at him. People remember things like that. Through the viewport, noticed watching. She broke away from the other dragons and glided toward the station, her massive form somehow graceful despite its size. She pressed her snout against the transparent wall, her silver eye meeting his gaze. "Are you happy, little one?" The question came into his mind like sunlight through clouds. It was warm and gentle, carrying all of love and concern. "Yeah," said, pressing his hand against the glass. "I think I am." "Good, that is all I ever wanted, for someone somewhere to be happy again." Watched the exchange with a soft expression. She had grown used to the silent conversations between and the dragons. She had even learned to feel the edges of them sometimes, like hearing music from another room. "What does she say?" asked. "She asks if I'm happy." "And are you?" Considered the question. He thought about everything that had happened since that day on Nexus Prime. The fear and the hope and the endless negotiations. The threats and the promises and the slow, difficult work of building something new. He thought about the enemies they had made. Admiral still hated them, still plotted ways to take the dragons by force. Other powers watched and waited, looking for weakness, looking for opportunity. The peace they were building was fragile, and there were many who wanted to see it break. But he also thought about the friends they had made. The young diplomat from the trader species who had risked everything to support their mission. The captain who had defended a human cargo ship against pirates, saying that allies protected each other. The thousands of beings across the galaxy who had felt the pulse and never forgotten it. He thought about the children on Earth who looked up at the stars and saw hope instead of fear. He thought about the young dragons learning to fly again, to sing again, to trust again. He thought about who had been alone for 10,000 years and now had a family. "Yeah," he said finally, "I really am." Outside and enjoined at the viewport. 4 ancient beings, survivors of genocide and of isolation, pressing close to see the small human who had changed everything. Placed his other hand against the glass, and the dragons responded by touching the spot from the outside. Human flesh and dragon scales, separated by a thin barrier but connected by something much stronger. Love, trust, hope. The stars burned on around them, vast and indifferent and eternal. They did not care about the small dramas of mortal beings. They did not notice the empires rising and falling, the wars fought and won and lost, the endless struggle for meaning in an uncaring universe. But the beings beneath those stars cared. They loved and hated and feared and hoped. They reached out across the darkness, looking for connection, looking for understanding, looking for someone to tell them they were not alone. That was what had given on that day in the containment chamber. Not power, not strategy, not anything the galaxy's great empires valued or understood. Just the simple truth that someone cared. And somehow, impossibly, that had been enough. Finished her tea and set the cup aside. Ready for tomorrow. The situation sounds complicated. Nodded, still watching the dragons. "We'll figure it out, we always do. Because you're brilliant. Because I have good friends." He meant the crew of the Horizon's Edge who had followed him into the unknown. He meant the humans across the galaxy who were learning to be diplomats and peacemakers and bridges between worlds. But most of all, he meant the 4 ancient beings floating outside his window, the last void dragons, the forgotten peacemakers of a lost age. His family. The galaxy had laughed when a human touched a dragon. They had expected death and destruction and the extinction of a foolish species. Instead, they got a new beginning. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, in the quiet places where old gods slept, others were waking up. Others were feeling the pulse of hope that had sent across the cosmos. Others were beginning to remember that kindness existed, that connection was possible, that the universe did not have to be cold and cruel and alone. The silence that had fallen when touched was not the silence of death. It was the silence of a galaxy holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the answer was not war. It was hope. And the galaxy would have to deal with the consequences.